Hello and welcome to another Digital Foundry Plays 2007 PC edition. And today I'm joined by my friend and colleague John Linneman as we play through the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion on the 8800 GT Q6600 machine of yore, the 2007 beast. And how you doing there, John?
Man, look at his face.
I know, it's amazing.
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing better than him, I think, actually. So this is interesting, right?
This game starts off with a pre-recorded, and it's actually using the in-game VSync here, the highest settings at 1080p. VSync actually locks this video to 30 FPS, which I'm actually surprised for the time.
Yeah.
I thought this would be way jankier. Usually videos playing at the beginning of games in the mid-2000 era. It's not great, but this is running pretty well, obviously.
That was a staple of Unreal Engine games, especially, where it's like you could always expect video playback to be awful.
Yeah, but here it looks pretty good. Obviously, this is not the in-game graphics. This is a pre-recorded thing, and there's even some like extra stuff here. You can see like they have like shadows in here on some things like under the trees.
Yeah, and you never actually get to see the city from this perspective and quality in the game engine. So, I mean, it may be based on the game engine assets, but you never see this.
But I think before we get into the technical aspects of this and how it's running on the machine and all that, I think we should talk a bit about what this game kind of means. It launched at the beginning part of 2006, like March or so. So the Xbox 360 had already launched at this point and been out for a while. And the PS3 was on the way. And I kind of feel like this is the area, oh wow, look at this face. The time when the Elder Scrolls series really blew up out of the PC platform more so than it had in the past.
So I would agree. I mean, I would argue that Morrowind was a huge success on the original Xbox. And I think the success of Morrowind and the attention it got in terms of bringing this style of game to a console for the first time ever. And I would argue the Xbox was the first platform that was kind of technically capable of doing a game of this size at all, just because of the memory and disk requirements. But you're right. Oblivion was definitely a case of right time, right place. And by having this launch so close to the launch of Xbox 360, just a few months after, I think that was really a key part of its success. Having an RPG this vast and also this impressive at the time was a big deal. And I think, we look at it now, it doesn't look great.
No.
In a lot of ways. But this was the first time we'd seen a game where with an open world like this, where you could just go outside and things weren't obscured and fog.
Yeah, all right.
Like you could just see far into the distance and you could go there. I think this is one of those games that would have spawned the whole, see that mountain over there, you can go there kind of things.
It's really good for that, I think. Like the first time you get outside in this game, which we're right now still in the Imperial Dungeon, as I'm editing, my character here. I'm having a little bit too much fun with this.
It's an awful character,
so
Alex.
And let's just, Jesus.
It looks like your character was stung by a death hornet or something.
Let's just edit the tone.
It's swelling up.
Should I have a beard?
Yes, please. Oh no. Oh, it looks like they're just like moving point lights around.
There's a big advantage to doing this system. Most of all of the characters in this game were kind of developed with this system already in mind, and this obviously is great for people who make their own characters. So you can kind of role play the game a bit better, depending upon like what race you choose and like what kind of background you want to look like or how you just want to look. But also it has like good memory saving requirements, because if each character is just a variation of a certain facial pattern, just with different weights on the different bones or something like that, then you save a ton on memory. Obviously it has a runtime cost, but for a game like this that is already trying to squeeze the entire game into like an Xbox 360 or PS3's memory pool, makes a lot of sense to do this.
Even still, though, it's been a while, but I seem to recall that there were some new limitations in this game that weren't present in Morrowind, specifically placing items within a house.
Oh, yeah?
I don't think you couldn't just leave items lying out, could you?
Oh, jeez.
Because I think that was one of the key features of Morrowind. I say that because my younger sister was obsessed with Morrowind on Xbox. played so much of it and basically took over Balmora and like killed everybody and took all the houses. And like she would have like a sword house, a shield house, you know, that like houses that were themed based on items, and would actually lay out the items all over the house in an interesting way. And I think when this game came out, it was like, oh, you can't do that anymore. Like you can only put them inside of objects. You don't see them lying out. And I'm wondering if just the additional complexity of all the static meshes they used for each mesh, I guess not static, but you know, each mesh for the item would have taken up too much memory. So they couldn't possibly have had an entire house full of swords.
I really doubt it too. That's something that you would see, I think, return again though in the Skyrim series of games, where you could reload the save and the entirety of kind of all your physically placed items would be still there.
Exactly, and that's an important thing I think to the series in terms of creating it. But before we leave this dungeony place,
I'm not going to move forward just yet.
Let's look at that wall. Let's look at that wall to the left. You know the one.
Yeah, this is my wall of shame, technically. For the longest period of time, I was really hating on this game for not having parallax maps, where, you know, like the wall looks like it's pseudo 3D here due to the texture being distorted based upon your screen position. I thought it was that way, and I had a bet going with John that this game did not use it. And then we loaded up the PS3 version at one point together when I was at his place. And I was very, very wrong. It's not only like on this wall, it's like every texture in the game has this. It's like, it's seriously everywhere. And it surprised the heck out of me. It's like every single thing is almost parallaxed map, excluding, I would say, like movable objects or destructible objects.
Yeah.
That's not something like almost no games do.
And I think that's interesting. I think it's something to discuss, because I feel that at the beginning of that generation, parallax mapping was kind of like the big new thing.
Yeah.
And we saw it a lot. Like both of Rare's launch titles, Perfect Dark Zero and of course Cameo, went crazy with parallax mapping. Like it was everywhere. And that was the thing that separated games like that. Like I remember just staring at the bricks in disbelief in Perfect Dark Zero and thinking like, look at this. This is nuts.
Yeah, I know.
And then it just seemed like after this and, you know, a few other early games, it just kind of faded away for a while. I mean, obviously Crysis came out on the PC with parallax occlusion maps and they looked awesome, but it felt like it just kind of went away.
Yeah, I think I don't even know why. Maybe just the complexity of it on like a level. It does increase your texture requirements, texture RAM requirements, because, you know, you have like a height map.
I will say though, we have to give a shout out to Ratchet and Clank, the first Ratchet and Clank on PS3, which was a 60 frames per second game that also featured parallax occlusion maps, which on the PS3 with its split memory architecture, that's crazy.
I know. This game on consoles was targeting 30 FPS. Wasn't always hitting it. We'll talk about that in a second. But on the Xbox 360, it was 1024 by 600 with 2 times MSAA. So fitting in that ES RAM or ED RAM, I mean.
But before we continue, you should probably load up into the Outworld, because we're just forcing the viewers to sit here staring at this dungeon. I mean, the palm is nice. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, I know. It is pretty cool looking. But yeah, let's go out into the outer world. I have obviously played through the tutorial already because it takes a long time. It's like 30 minutes long almost. And
it's absurd.
Then I did get out to the open world aspect already. Yeah, this game was running at 1024 by 600 with 2 times MSAA on the Xbox 360 and was not actually a great performer. And as we're seeing here, though, right now on this 8800, you know, GT Q6600 machine, it's running at 1080p with no MSAA right now and 60 FPS. And this is using the HDR as well, too, the HDR feature.
I think that's important to note, because the 8800 series was a game changer for NVIDIA and PC gaming in general, I feel. Because on other GPUs of this era prior to this, you weren't getting 60 frames per second constant in this way. But the 8800 series was able to blitz through just about every PC game you could imagine, save for Crysis that would arrive in 2007.
Yeah.
This is a very special, very powerful card for the time. And yeah, Oblivion was, I suppose it was one of the showpiece titles for the card at the time, because, you know, this game was relatively new when it hit.
And, you know, it was using, you know, obviously, like, you have the stuff like the parallax maps and, you know, HDR, which was new into games. This is not HDR, obviously, output, but HDR internally in the engine, so that the colors are reproduced more accurately with less banding. And also, in this game, they did a weird thing with the HDR where the HDR setting also enables their bloom, and they have a very low threshold for what actually causes blooming. So, which is why, like, it looks kind of cool and ethereal here, like on those ruins across the way. I actually kind of like the way it looks over there. But then you look at my hand, and my hand's glowing.
I know. I don't
like it there. I like it over there. I don't like it on my hand where I'm glowing.
Again, 2006,
Yeah.
The HDR pipelines were still relatively
a new effect.
I mean, of course, we had Far Cry 1.3 was one of the first ones I remember.
And I'd say that's HDR done right in comparison to this. This is just like way
But anyway,
too
we should start exploring. And first, how about those reflections? What are they doing there? Are those planar reflections, or is they just like drawing to a texture?
I think these are planar reflections of the world at a lower detail level.
Resolution. Yeah. I can't tell because I'm watching you play via Discord.
Yeah.
So the resolution is very low, so it's difficult to even see what's going on with those reflections.
Slight little overworld hitch there. I mean, that's probably something that this game will still have. I'm pretty sure Skyrim still even has that on PC if you play it these days.
Yeah.
Slight overworld hitching when you move around a bit.
This view was such a key moment of the generation, I feel. Whether you were PC gaming or console gaming, just being able to look around and see all those trees and the rolling hills, it was an impressive sight. Even though we look at this now and it just looks like a bunch of billboard trees kind of copy and pasted all over this flat repeating texture.
Yeah,
but still, for 2006, this was great.
There's some stuff that's you can see that the bushes are actually made up of billboards that face you, which is very interesting. Not a lot of games actually do that. Obviously, for this game, they wanted it to look 3D, but still keep the amount of transparencies down, so it billboards to you.
That's the trick that was used in games often like Gran Turismo Sport and Drive Club. And it makes a lot of sense in a driving game because you're basically always moving in one direction. So you're not really walking around them.
Yeah.
And it allows you to do really nice, clean-looking leaves with minimal aliasing and a lower performance impact.
The aliasing will, since it's always turning with you, it won't actually alias as much, which is great.
Exactly.
This crab.
Is it a mud crab? Or?
What does it say? Mud crab, yeah. Which are also in Skyrim. I remember them there. Gosh. A big part of this game, obviously, too, is the, I would say, more fully realized version of Havoc physics, which they integrated into the engine. And so, like, the tutorial teaches you, I was just punching those chains earlier, obviously, but it teaches you a lot of the environmental hazards that exist in the game. Like, you can kind of crisis style push logs over, or there's there's traps and stuff like you would have seen in Far Cry Instincts or things like that. Wow, but this texture is very surprisingly detailed with that parallax maps on it.
All right, you should. Let's decide which way. I think you should go southeast. Just point directly southeast. And
let's go over there. And obviously, I played as a battle mage here. I picked like the constellation of Magica or something.
Lichtum Battle Mage.
I did try this game. Obviously, is not nearly as polished as Lichtum Battle Mage, Sean. I have no idea what you're talking about. But this game can technically run with MSAA on PC, of course. The initial, I don't know if we should go up there. The initial time you open the game up, the launcher doesn't let you run MSAA at the same time as using the HDR effect. I don't know why. Whoa, did you see that load in?
Oh, I think it's those world segments.
Oh yeah,
right? Isn't that how this engine works, where it's broken up into like a grid of segments? If you
that
will?
Was brutal looking. Wow.
And it was just popped in very obviously, but yeah.
So you can't run MSAA with HDR at the same time unless you force it from the control panel. Ooh, obviously this is technically the highest settings that you can get through the launcher, but obviously it still obviously has some nice pop in here. This is one of those games where it's modded like crazy. So you can
that's the caveat, right?
You can probably download all these things that increase the view distance dramatically over what we're seeing here.
I think it's clear you're trying to show the game running as it may have at the time when it launched, as opposed to what can be done with it, because the modding community is absolutely amazing for this game. They've done so much. That and Skyrim even more, honestly.
Oh yeah.
That's a big part of the appeal of the Elder Scrolls at this point, but this is obviously just vanilla. Freedom
and sandbox to do what you want and then mod it as you want, which I've always really liked. So here, this is cool. It's 54 FPS right now, and GPU limited, 98% on the GPU. I did find out that this game obviously runs most of all scenes at 60 FPS in my play so far, but there are some GPU and CPU limited things. Like if I bring out my torch here, it'll probably turn down the frame rate even more. Yeah, like 48, 51-ish. This casts like real-time shadows. Obviously none right here, since nothing here casts real-time shadows. The game doesn't really have real-time shadows per se.
This is interesting to think, because 2006 is an era before things like, ambient occlusion had been really like developed and included in these big games. And there's just a lot of other techniques with shadows and stuff that didn't exist yet, right? Like, because this was really early in the generation, and so it doesn't have a lot of the features that we would come to know as standard. Yeah,
like Skyrim, for example, added in real-time shadow maps for things. This game just has the time of day advancing, and it changes like the shading on objects, obviously. But all the shadows underneath things that aren't like from torches, by the way, are just like drop shadows, more or less. Like this is very like a fake shadow. It's not actually being cast from
exactly. But it's effective enough for the time, and it's performant.
It definitely runs, and it could technically render out further into the distance probably than most shadow maps probably could from the time period.
So one weird controversial opinion I have about the visuals here is on Xbox 360 they use a relatively low level of anisotropic filtering, whereas on PlayStation 3, weirdly enough, and of course on PC, you can push that out much further. But I actually think this is a game where low AF is a benefit, because when all you have is these super repetitive textures that just stretch out into the distance, and you just see the tiling, and it's really distracting. And by reducing the AF and kind of blurring that out, obviously it's blurrier, but it almost just gives it a slightly more consistent, coherent look.
Yeah, I'm going to actually agree with you there. That's a rare thing for me to say, that this game would look better with less anisotropic filtering. But look at that tiling. It's brutal. And, obviously, because there's so little ground coverage beyond the base texture, it's really painfully obvious. It's not like there's a lot of variation there. There's like no like splatting of decals over everything. This is just like ground texture painting, and it tiles.
So that's the thing about the visual design in this game, is I feel that they paid close attention to the very near field and far field objects, but the mid range isn't really addressed well.
Yeah.
Like things look good up close, and the distant shots, the vistas look awesome, but everything kind of in between the far and the near field is kind of lacking. You really see the limitations.
Like, look at that. That actually looks, I would say, for the time, this looks pretty great. And I think that's like the kind of...
That's still attractive now.
Like, I one of the things that I really remember about this game when it launched was kind of like a lot of specular or like metal looking effects. I remember really liking the look of the swords and like the plate armor in the game, which I'm not wearing right now. I'm wearing
also the stonework, like inside some of the tombs and such.
Oh yeah, right.
They had this really nice texture material. I wonder if you can find one of those.
I think there's a tomb probably coming up here, if I recall, unless this is something else entirely. Maybe up there on the hill. But I ended up not beating this game back in the day. I beat through. I destroyed the first Oblivion gate. Got a little further than that. Went a little bit of stutter. Went inside a forest and saw within the same view 2 Oblivion gates, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is all the game is. Oh, wow. So I stopped playing at that point in time when I realized I was just kind of like progressing in like a cyclical fashion. Whoa, check that out.
Now,
I'm being shot at.
This is the console version of this was backwards compatible on Xbox One, isn't it?
Yeah, it is actually. So you can play this at 4K and 2 times MSIA.
But it's locked to 30 frames per second, which reminded me of how Morrowind on Xbox was not capped. And I did a video on this, but if you play Morrowind on an Xbox One X, it basically runs at 60 frames per second.
That's awesome.
Which is quite funny.
I hope the back compat team. This is the only thing that's keeping this at 30 FPS is just a silly frame rate cap.
Yeah, it's just they'd have to modify the software to get around that. I mean, maybe that's possible. I'm not sure, but
I mean, I think I get some CPU GPU related drops when I get hit by a fireball, which is kind of cool. Because
the fireball doesn't look great.
No,
up
it
close.
doesn't.
Oh, do you see that shadow?
Whoa, does it really actually cast a
fireball?
shadow? Let's do that again. Yeah, it does. It
like,
changes the direction of a shadow as it moves past him. So he's always
That's
casting
fun.
a shadow, but then it like changes the direction it's.
It
Yep,
moves,
like that.
yeah.
As you can see,
Man, this
I mean,
combat.
you can listen to the sounds into it. It's very obviously basic. It's no Dark Side of Might and Magic as we've talked about before. It's all about
baby.
the RPG systems, and I guess this kind of is also one of their first games that I'm gonna maybe die if I'm not careful here. I have to heal up. This is one of the games where I think they introduced leveling, like the world levels as you level, too. So there's not like areas that are overly higher level than you are.
So that was one of the things I dislike the most about this game. And I feel that it absolutely destroyed the exploration aspect. Because in older Elder Scrolls games, there was a thrill in trying to visit places you really weren't supposed to be. And you knew that the enemies there would decimate you, and it was, it was exciting and kind of fun to try to get your way through there. But here, it just feels like everything's flat.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with that. Like, I think it's a big part of RPG games is feeling the growth of your character in comparison to the world. So I'm not always a big fan of the world leveling with you. I'm trying to find some weak.
It is interesting. Have you played much of going back to like the original Daggerfall, which is the second Elder Scrolls
I haven't played
game?
it recently, but I did definitely play quite a bit of it. You cannot drink anymore.
That was powered by the X engine, and it was what I think that might still be the largest Elder Scrolls game to date, just in terms of sheer volume of space
I would
that you can explore.
100% imagine that being.
I mean, it has
the
a
case.
very, you look at it now, it's a very simplistic, basic-looking world map, but it was massive at the time, and even a little bit confusing. But man, was it ambitious! An ambitious game.
Pretty awesome. One thing, obviously, this is like we're getting to one of those really cool dungeon aspects.
Yeah, I
I
like
think
this.
the dungeons in this game is like one of the things they were talking about was each dungeon in this game was technically, unlike Daggerfall, I think that has a lot of procedural generation in it. I think each one of these dungeons was actually someone had to author them, obviously using a tile set and things like that,
Right.
because they all do look very similar in the end.
Yeah.
But they were all at least authored, crafted is the way to say it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it does obviously have its advantages probably in terms of like lighting and things like that for a 3D engine.
I tend to agree. That was one of the things that helped this game, that actually did work really well in this game, was the fact that the dungeon sequences felt much more unique and interesting than they had in the past.
Yeah. I'm trying to find some skeletons. Technically, I could spawn a skeleton because I am a mage and I can use that magic. I love these parallax textures on the ground.
Amazing. I love them too.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
wait, why are you not dead?
Because
Did you go in between?
I went
the
in between the
spikes?
spikes and I think I did. I don't even think I took damage there, to be completely honest.
No, you did not.
Wow, that's impressive. That's physics for you. Yeah, like, oh, this sucks.
Uh-oh.
I think I'm supposed to grab these or something, and then it spawns enemies, if I recall.
So what's I can't tell from the stream, but does the UI scale up to resolutions higher than 720?
It gets, I think a little. No, wait. Actually, it stays the exact same size. That's right. There's mods online that you can download that make the size kind of more appropriate for
I
4K monitors and things like that nowadays. But I think it actually stays the exact same screen space size as it does at 1280 by 720, so rather large. Jeez. I did. One thing I think that is kind of interesting is this is also a change to the series UI. It kind of had a more traditional PC style UI, I would say. Let me down here. This is not good. Where you kind of would be able to move around like the windows and things like that. But this one has a more dedicated, like when you open up the UI, it's always on the left-hand side here, and it looks like it was slightly developed more with tabbing through with like keys or with the console online. But it's actually visually, I think aesthetically, really great looking. Like I actually kind of in some way prefer the higher saturation and kind of more high fantasy look that this game has next to Skyrim in some ways. Obviously, I think engine-wise, Skyrim looks quite a bit better, but for some reason, I don't know why, I do like this kind of old look to it.
I have high expectations for what they do next, hopefully. I mean,
oh yeah, right?
by getting away from, it seems to me that the massive boost in CPUs we'll be seeing for next generation consoles should allow them to do some more ambitious things that just weren't possible.
Yeah, right.
This gen, because I think Fallout 4 was really held back by the very weak CPUs, because these are games that love CPU.
Yeah, I know, right? That game kind of was always kind of dropping frame rate on. Oh my gosh, this is a mage. This is not good. I probably should not have engaged them.
Oh boy.
As you can see, there's oh jeez. Combat is not this game's strength. It's more of its RPG elements.
I mean, it's still improved, I think, in many ways.
Yeah, right. Am I actually doing damage to him? Very little damage. Oh, is he spawning these guys in? Oh, I'm dead.
Yep, you're out.
I'm down and out for the count. It autosaved. Let's go back outside and explore a different area. Ugh. So that's the inside of an area. In terms of stuff that, like, obviously, I think the way they could kind of take this, another direction they could take this in is they've always, ever since this game, or even actually Morrowind, had like dynamic time of day. I would really love to see their engine pull off some sort of interesting global illumination scheme the next time they come out, because Fallout, it has like such varied content in it, and same with Skyrim, that like sometimes when you go in areas of like Fallout 4 or Skyrim that are like indirectly lit, they look a little bit awkward, while the rest of the game looks pretty okay, I would say.
Actually, it's been quite some time since Fallout 4 released, hasn't it?
That was, what was that, 2017 at this point?
Yeah. No, I think it was before that even.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Then it's even earlier than I thought. In which case, yeah, it would be nice to see them see what they've done in the meantime, especially if their next game is actually not going to be Fallout or Skyrim, but instead some sort of space game, like we keep hearing about.
Yeah, it's been 5 years.
Oh my gosh, really? Wow.
2015.
Oh.
And I guess they contributed to Fallout 76, but I don't think that was primarily this team's big project at the time.
That was the, I think Fallout 76 was partially made by the people working on, what is it, Elder Scrolls Online? Wasn't it as well too?
No, it was, geez, I can't even remember exactly. But
let's try and get inside the city.
It was like a studio based in Texas.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Bethesda Game Studios Austin, but they're known as out. But I think they were like Battlecry Studios or something originally.
Oh, Battlecry. They also worked on the game Battlecry, which never came out, which was a CryEngine 5 or CryEngine game. I don't remember what it was, but they were.
See, I would love to see the Crysis or the CryEngine license. If it's like, when you make a game with CryEngine, you have to include Cry in the title.
It's a prerequisite basically at this point in time. I remember before Rise came out, that there was something like, it originally wasn't called Rise, but for some reason they added the Y to the title to like
of course.
Yeah, that's actually pretty awkward. So what you're seeing there is like the stones inside of it are like have a low, like their level of detail system for terrain can look a little awkward at some point in times. Like right there, I don't know what's going on right there.
So I believe with this specific iteration of the creation engine, there were huge limits. Like the terrain was like a rolling terrain system. You couldn't do terrain that would loop back over itself.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, right.
So anything that crosses over, like that bridge, would have to be like a static mesh that you would basically stick into the terrain as an object, and you couldn't have like a cliffside really where like the cliff would hang over. You see how they try to do it there, and it's just its own specific
they
mesh.
insert a mesh into the ground, which by the way has a really nice parallax texture, but it is unfortunately
it does have a nice texture.
But it's like all tiled all over it, so it kind of looks a little awkward. I remember like a big part in the lead up to this game was just like the screenshots they released, and I thought it really did at the time look incredibly next gen, next to things like Half-Life 2, obviously, but this game not being a story game or something like that, where it's just a single player story where you go through in a linear fashion, there's a lot more bugs and a lot more, I don't want to say jank, but I want to say less polish in areas versus others. So like obviously animation is not the priority here.
this was a time when doing a large-scale game like this meant that you had to make sacrifices in terms of things like animation quality and, the precision of your interactions, right?
What is it, citizen?
Oh, I said that shadow is interesting.
Yeah.
How it kind of faded in.
I think it's actually, let's see the fade in distance of these shadows. Inside the city, by the way, I'm getting CPU limited here because my GPU is underutilized and 2 of my CPU cores are being thrashed right now, high 80s, 90s. And this is actually kind of the area where if I was running on a modern system, we wouldn't see this, but the Q6600 for its day was pretty powerful CPU. It was rivaling like the consoles in terms of core count, but its frequency was actually kind of low, 2.4 gigahertz standard. You could overclock it to 3.0 or 3.2, but obviously at the cost of your like chip's life expectancy. I had one of these and I overclocked to 3.2 and it only lasted about like 3 or 4 years. Then it burnt out the motherboard and itself.
Great.
So here we are. Yeah, I know, right? I loved that at the time. CPU limited in this game.
Well, this is a great looking area.
I know, right?
In the
I actually
city.
do really love like it's really meshing well with the time of day here. We're slightly overcast looking, obviously, and all these other things. Like
Also, these sort of pillar-like structures is very of this era.
It's reminds me of like the intro part to Gears of War. Like that also has tons
Precisely.
of pillars and like masonry and stuff like that. And if you actually look at this, is that a texture? Yeah, it is actually just a texture, but it's parallaxed.
That's
So
pretty
it actually
nice.
looks pretty
Yeah.
all right when you walk around it. I did
Is there anything else you want to see here for?
call it out.
Yeah.
I actually don't know. There's the one thing I kind of do is I want to talk to someone. Oh wait, let's not actually do that. He's gonna tell me to put away my thing. What are you gonna do about it?
It's all over, lawbreaker.
Whoa.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to someone to mention specifically how the cinematic camera works in this game. Obviously, when you have this huge
that.
world and you can walk around characters all the time, it has to do something when you interact with them to actually draw the camera in. And usually what it does is it just moves you and the person around at the same time while zooming the FOV really intensely. And they used it for the longest time. Basically, I want to say it's almost kind of in Fallout 4 to a certain degree. It looks better now, obviously, because they have like depth of field and really cool stuff. But yeah, that's really awkward. I think I should resist arrest here. What do you think, John?
I think so.
Yeah, let's do it.
Then pay with your blood.
This is so good. Only if you could hear the audio from this, John. Wow, they are absolutely destroying me, though. I was not ready for this. There's kind of like a really weird blur effect that applies to the screen when you get hit and you block. I don't know if you're seeing that at all, but it's kind of one thing that this game, obviously, there's not a lot of post. Yeah, I got absolutely destroyed there. And I think that's almost where we should leave it, John. What do you say?
I think so
Yeah.
too. I think so too.
Oblivion here, I think it's actually a kind of pretty interesting game from the era. It overcame a lot of technical problems and bringing, like a game of this complexity to an open world at a certain level of detail. It was one of the first of its kind to be this detailed and have these advanced graphical options. But it obviously had some of its problems of its own, like the terrain, the way it loads, and it lacks a lot of other features that would be brought in at the end of the console generation, like shadow maps and stuff. But it's a pretty okay looking game, HDR aside.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very 2006, and it was the first time we saw an RPG with scale like this, really. So yeah, it was an important game. It really kind of set the tone and helped build the hype for Bethesda-style games. Going forward, obviously Fallout 3 would be huge when that hit, and then Skyrim. My goodness.
Yeah, I know. Just a juggernaut being built. But thanks for talking to me about this, John.
Sure thing.
Yeah, and if you did enjoy this video of our looking back on this 2007 machine at the classic Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you're already a subscriber, then consider hitting that little bell in the corner to be informed as soon as Digital Foundry posts a video. If you want to help Digital Foundry out, consider supporting us on Patreon to get years worth of Digital Foundry content available in high quality for download. If you want to talk to John or myself about this game or 2007 PCs, write a comment below or follow John and myself on Twitter. And as always, this is John and Alex saying Auf Wiedersehen und
Farewell.